So, starting this again. One day I might be a slightly less retarded YouTuber who doesn't forget to turn the microphone on before I start and talk for 20 minutes until someone tells me it's not switched on and they can't hear me. So, hopefully you can hear me now. I'm just waiting for confirmation of that, and then I will start again. Which is probably a good thing in a way, because I tend to rabbit on for the first 10 minutes or so while I try and figure out what I actually want to say. Okay, good, you can hear me. Happy days. Okay, so anyway, obviously the whole point of this, like I did the previous time and like I've done a few times before, was just to run through equities to see whether I can get any insight into what's going to happen in the next week or thereafter from where the equities are, like for the indices, and then obviously the indices we then use for crypto to give us some idea of direction. So rather than, I haven't actually charted all these as yet for updates. I mean, there's not much to add really. There's some new supply in there that I need to add, but all of our longs and shorts from last week worked really well, so I'm very pleased about that, and I hope you use some of the alerts that came through in the FX channel. And then, you know, nothing's really changed since then other than that. I'm just kind of looking at, you know, I didn't want to make any long calls in here, like we have just hit appropriate fibs, but because there were so many, all these little choppy hourly demands through here, but nothing major, I didn't want to suggest any long entries, so I haven't got any new alerts on there. The only alert I've added for the moment that's new actually is one on DJI here, just because it didn't quite hit the monthly here, so I think it's worth just watching to see if we swing fairly if we do get back down here. Everyone I'm watching, like I don't watch a heap of other analysis, but everyone I'm watching does tend to think that with, you know, everyone's uber bearish. You know, I watched some other analysis yesterday that said 91% of the top CEOs think that we're going into recession. So who am I to argue as, you know, an analyst pleb? But the thing from a TA perspective I do just want to make you aware of and remain aware of myself is that so many of these, you know, these green entries and the alerts that I had were actually not the S&P one, but a lot of the reasons I put them there is because they're major high time frame demand zones, and particularly so like DJI being the biggest, I think. You know, it's a first hit on a 6 monthly demand. So we got the reaction we expected to get off here. You know, when I say the reaction we expected to get, if it's going to be a decent 6 month reaction, it's going to go straight up and take out the highs. But obviously it's not going to do that overnight. And, you know, you can look back over here and see that this took a month, I think, from so 17th of June to the next proper low at 14th of July. So it took a month before it actually started the run, a month of faffing around. And also this it had monthly supply, but only all the way up here. So this hasn't even come up to test the monthly supply on that first bounce. So certainly I expect to kind of move into here. But all the other analysis I'm seeing, everybody's pretty much super bearish. And you know, it's not necessarily that easy that, you know, yes, while we're on a 6 month demand on DJI, obviously it's the COVID 6 month demand. Like I saw some other analysis yesterday that said they think that we're going to retrace all of the COVID drop. And that's obviously entirely possible, and that 6 month demand will still be considered holding even if we drop down to, you know, 18,000, which is a 75% drop. No, it's not 75% anyway. My maths just went briefly out of the window there, but anyway, whatever the drop is. But that doesn't mean we can't obviously go deeper into the 6 month demand. on this, but we just start watching for those bounces as things hit. And as you know, I like the confluence of everything, of all looking at all the different pairs together. So then going back to all the rest of them, other than I think NASDAQ and S&P, like all the others, I'm fairly comfortable with where we are to potentially look for longs on a macro, while we can still obviously go deeper. And when I say look for longs on a macro, I mean then we still need to create, you know, daily, 3-day, weekly demands inside and see the structures change. And it's still very early days for that, but I'm not necessarily, you know, looking for these sort of massive drops that everybody else is right now, or at least I don't want to be looking for massive shorts when we are in demand. And that doesn't mean you can't short, and it doesn't mean we can't go deeper. And you can see here on Australia, for example, you know, I've got there's a weekly down there, there's a 2-monthly down there, but I just think with a slight wariness. So I'll get onto NASDAQ and S&P, but Australia, as I said, when we had this last bounce here, and we got all the longs, if you remember, on that last bounce, this is an annual demand. On the US 2000 Russell Index, we're in a 6-month demand. I think it's the second bounce on it, but it's 6-month demand. UK is one of the weaker ones as well. I mean, but you know, it's had multiple bounces here. It doesn't mean it's going to continue to hold. It's got an annual just below there. So there's some things that make me think I think we can get a secondary drop, which could take DJI and some of the others a little bit deeper. But to think we're sort of continuing to go to hell from here, I'm not really sure. The other analysis that I've watched, I watched the Alessio analysis, I think, on using the moving averages. And again, you know, if we're going to follow, or if you trade moving averages, you know, they trade, you know, we have fallen below, we're below significant ones, where I don't think close, I need to run that again, but I don't think we're close to bouncing on the next one down. But then also, as most people know, I'm slightly cynical of moving averages, because I think it just depends which one you choose, and you'll always find one we're going to bounce on or reject from. But yeah, I just want to be slightly conscious of that. And the other one that I don't have on here that also was the euro, also hit, I think, a 3-month. So the euro's in an annual and hit a 3-month. But, you know, so even if we compared this, say, to Australian dollar being the second hit on the annual, that doesn't mean it's not going to get a significant move up, you know, even if it then does fall in deeper later. And then once we see these down waves start to break, obviously we're looking at these down moves. And once we see that high break, that's when we can flip long. So, but do you want to miss the whole move up there? I don't particularly. So I'd rather at least be aware of that, whilst noting we're in this downtrend. We are still in a much bigger uptrend, and obviously macro uptrend. Probably less so on the EU, but certainly on NASDAQ and all the US stocks. So yeah, anyway, just be conscious of that whilst being locally bearish. Last week gave us varying bounces. Obviously, we got some really nice shorts in there, like I said. The US stocks dumped more, NASDAQ particularly, than everything else. And Australian dollars held the best, I think. UK wasn't too bad, and EU is not too bad, but all the US ones are generally weaker. NASDAQ, and again, not surprisingly, so NASDAQ, we came off a 3-week demand at the bottom of this bigger 2-month that we've been in for a while. Not a zone I would particularly be comfortable saying yes, do a macro long here until we, unless we get some actual structure that tells us to do that. Also came off monthly supply. A handful of them hit monthly supply last week on the bounce, but not all of them. So again, I still need to go through all of these in detail, and that's not really the point of this video. The point is more for just looking at the actual individual equities. Yeah, these are just things to be conscious of if you are trading these, and also if you're an investor, because for me, if you're an investor, to start potentially scaling back in, if you're in the US stocks and things like that, is not necessarily a bad thing, presuming you keep some. It depends, the tech stocks I still think can go lower, S&P 500 I still think it can go lower, DJI it's possible is going to hold, or hold at least less of a drop, it's just maybe smaller drops inside the 6-month if these are going to go lower, whereas these have potentially more to go to get to there. So this is a more solid weekly demand down here, and then the monthly, as I've said before, on NASDAQ is substantially lower. S&P held a weekly in here. And again has the monthly, or 2 monthly in fact, lower. So I would like to see S&P and Nasdaq lower, which, you know, likely means the whole market will go lower, because I don't know if they'll go off on their own. And, you know, maybe we'll see all this play out this week with the CPI news. So yeah, moving on from that, just to look at the equities. Start from the top again, since, like I say, I started these in silence previously. So it's not going to be, again, vast differences since last week's analysis, or was it 2 weeks ago I did the analysis. So we obviously, then I wanted more of a drop, then we got more of a drop, and then I said we were going to hit these demands, which we have. We got that bounce off them, in some cases higher than others. So Amazon is one of the still slightly stronger ones. It's come off a 3-month demand. It didn't quite hit 3-month supply, but did hit some weekly stuff in here. I still could potentially see this doing another move up, at least, you know, to this weekly. So we might see a bit of a correction up. The only thing is, what I will get to, and you'll see in a minute, is some of these we're also seeing going deeper into this weekly demand. But those tend to be the ones that have hit monthly supply. So it's possible Amazon's going to end up just being either more stagnant or one of the stronger ones. Apple, yeah, is another example. You know, this one's gotten a bit deeper than Amazon has into the weekly demand, and potentially I could see this doing another test here. But again, we have a 3-month demand here. We don't want to be unnecessarily bearish unless we start to see this break. If we do, then we will potentially get a drop that could half the price of something like Apple. Then we will see a recession. But as it stands, we are still holding these levels. It's the second test of it. It's possible higher low, and so we're looking for, at this point, are we going to start to get another correction up? How strong is it going to be? If you see decent strength in here, then, you know, we're coming from a 3-month demand. There's no reason this can't make a new high. So while I'm not bullish as yet, because it's not, you know, we're still seeing this sort of weekly downtrend and a monthly downtrend, we are still in a 3-month uptrend. So until that breaks, you can't be, you know, shorting right on support here. So yeah, in the case of Apple, we hit this weekly demand, but not looking particularly strong on the bounce off it. Google's pretty much the same. But Google, like I say, I didn't really want to trade this weekly demand anyway. The drop I expect to continue, and expected to continue down to at least a monthly. We've now got a monthly supply, so even if we do get a retest that ends up bigger off this weekly, I would expect to be looking for shorts in here to get us down somewhere to one of these lower zones. Yeah, around at least the 61 fib, possibly the 70 fib. So again, that's still a decent size, 10-20% drop from Google. Tesla, I think, again, was the same. And Tesla's actually on a 6-month demand. So like I was saying with Apple, you know, it's if we start seeing this, you know, this hasn't finished the 6 months, you know, we've still got 3 months to go before this can be anything. But if you start to see, you know, the 6 months gone quite heavily into, this didn't have a rounded retest either. We don't really like these immediate retests of 6 months, of any sort of demand. But if this does start dropping and continue to drop deeper in here, then potentially you are looking for bigger shorts, you know, down to here, down to 24. I don't know. Much I'd like to see Tesla go to $24. I don't know if that's really that viable. I'll go back onto the log chart anyway, so it looks somewhat less dramatic. But, you know, there's really, you know, from the last consolidation in 2013, you know, it had 6 years of sideways. And we've now had 2019, 2021 ridiculous up move. So, you know, either we'll see a lot more sideways here, or we're going to start to see a correction. So not terribly surprising, but until we break that demand or some significant demand, I can't be over bearish. So we made a supply, we came off the supply, but the supply can only is just a range until we see this demand break. So Tesla, yeah, is starting to look a bit weaker, but again, on support. So for as far as this week's goes, so far, I think all of these pretty much, you know, we've had a decent drop. It's more likely that we're going to see at least some sort of a correction this week. Upward correction, I mean. before we then either continue the drop or decide this is going to be a higher low. Microsoft, yeah, was looking one of the more bearish ones again. Broken trend, and didn't even get a really decent bounce off this monthly in here. I did have an alert, do have an alert for the 2 monthly just below. I can't remember why I selected that, but apparently I did. Got a monthly supply above, so this could, you know, help the whole, help NASDAQ get a bit of a bounce, because we would expect this, given it hasn't really done much, and has dropped significantly off that last week's high. We'll potentially expect this to come, maybe to take out that low, but to come into the 2 month and then at least give a reasonable bounce up to then we'll check the test on the monthly supply when it comes back up here again. Facebook continues to drift down, and this is a nice example, you know, something that again that has come through. So when we're looking, well, this did get an immediate retest, bounce off this annual zone. But now this rounded retest has come very, very deeply into it, and it's just, you know, we saw only some minor bounces off this, and not really getting any strength out of Facebook at the moment. So it's kind of interesting, and I don't really know why fundamentally Facebook dropped so significantly. But if you believe in it in a company, and if you know what the fundamentals are, there's no reason you shouldn't start scaling into this at some stage, because that drop that it's had, now 65% down off its highs, you know, and if you can start, if you know the ones that have dropped significantly, and if you believe in them as companies, there's no reason you shouldn't start scaling in here. You know, stop out yourself if you want to, if it goes below here, you know, because there is a decent drop still that it could do, or just scale in bits, hoping at some stage we're going to get a retest, because, you know, the log chart again doesn't look bad, but you can see how significantly it's dropped when you look at the linear. Netflix is much the same, and Netflix, I said a couple of weeks ago, this was one of the ones that I thought maybe one of the only things I thought could be a long, and while it hasn't been a long per se, it has held, and it's, I think, the only thing that held. I remember there were 2 things I mentioned, but I literally for the life of me can't remember the other one. It might come to me as I go down, but I did have a skim through last week, and I couldn't find which other one I said to watch, but Netflix was one of them. So this has held the 3-day, whereas everything else has dropped back through it. It's got this monthly demand below, so again, no reason why you shouldn't look at buying a retest on this monthly, assuming it doesn't hit one of these first. But the only thing we have with Netflix is it's got these sort of indirect, but if it could make it back past those, you've got a decent move that it can make up to the weekly, and if it, you know, really did rebound dramatically, and then you've got this 6 monthly supply all the way up here. Again, you know, check your fundamentals for this type of thing. You know, I just trade off TA, so I don't really like, you know, kind of going, oh, you know, Netflix is great, it's going to do this. But I think a lot of the reason for the drop on this, if I remember rightly, was they just made some sort of comment about there would be a lot more competition in the subscription market. But I think it was literally a comment, and it wasn't data that said they'd lost or anything like that. And I think possibly their earnings didn't even show they'd lost, but yet we still got this sort of significant drop. Might have been that one, off the back of that comment. So yeah, do your own analysis. Do your own research. But you know, this is one that I could potentially see a long on, if not in this 3-day here, possibly in the monthly below. And all of these I probably want to wait out to some extent to see what happens with CPI this week, because I don't think it's the wisest week to be trading. Nvidia is one of the ones we look at with regard to Bitcoin as well, and this one, yeah, that I said it was already starting to come through demand. It rejected off weekly supply here and is now through this weekly, unless we get some sort of swing failure off the lows, taking out the lows here. This doesn't necessarily bode that well for Bitcoin, because, yeah, this, I don't know if it's really that well aligned with Bitcoin, but I remember it used to be, because I haven't followed it as much, but back in 2018 it was very, very similar, in that the drop came around the time Bitcoin started making its high, and a lot of it's, I don't know, so I can't say that, so at least some of its revenue is related to Bitcoin mining. I have no idea how much or any percentage or whether it really should be correlated, but it was just one of the things I started looking back at 2018, and it does seem to help with a little bit with Bitcoin analysis. Anyway, this is just chop below, so if this one has pretty much run through 3-month demand, short of potentially getting the swing failure off the lows here. Let's stick that 3-month in. Yeah. Okay, so it has closed. It's closed still within this range, but it's closed below the level that I would have liked to see it not close below. So the chances of this dropping down to the next 3 months is reasonably high. So that's not going to do Nasdaq a lot of good either. Only thing in its favour is that we could still just take stops and do a swing failure here, and if we start seeing that, then yeah, leap in at the speed of light. But again, still big monthly supply, but monthly supply right above, so how far and how fast it's going to go is highly debatable. PayPal, another one that looked fairly horrible. Has held this monthly demand down here, or was it a 2-month? No, it was a monthly at the base of all this sort of chop, but a bit like the first few that I was analysing, although it's dropped much more significantly. Looking for the test to come back in on this weekly. Slightly stronger than some of the others actually, though, since so many of them come down to the weekly already. But with these ones that have already dropped a lot, maybe now they just have to kind of hang out and wait a bit whilst everything else kind of catches up with the extent of the drop. So I guess, remains to be seen. Obviously, most people know I haven't been charting equities that long, so and this is also quite new behaviour compared to the up only we've had for so many years. Costco was a new one I started charting more recently. It was one of the third wave to come down. So we had the discretionary spending first, then tech spending, and then more of the Costco's, Targets, Walmart's, what do you call that, primary spending perhaps. Broke monthly, hit a weekly, rejected 2-month. Probably expecting more down on this. Nice head and shoulders there. I don't know if do I get volume on this? Just about to click, yeah, so then, yeah. Head and shoulders, checking head and shoulders volume. So what you want to see is you see the volume coming into the first shoulder, then you want to see less volume in the head is what you are getting, because that shows the buying's dying off. Then you want to see increased volume on the sell-off, which we also have. Then you want to see, this is in order for the head and shoulders to play out, then you want to see the buying coming back in on the right shoulder but lower again, which we do have here, and then you'll see the bigger sell-off. So this is kind of conforming to that, although we don't necessarily have really high volume on this sell-off. I will probably reserve judgment on this one, but yeah, the signs are pointing to down. Not something I would want to trade in either direction at the moment, though. And my computer's beeping at me somewhat irritatingly, so sorry, it's throwing me off slightly. ASML, yeah, quite clearly I would expect this to be going down to the 2-month demand. I mean, yeah, it's sort of made of sort of support there, but not one I would ever trade either, off monthly supply. Expect more of a drop on that. Peloton, I'm sure, still looks like shit, although it has gone up 6%. Exciting. I don't even know why I still have this on the list. I just found it amusing after COVID. I think that it just died so dramatically. Snap is another one like Facebook. Again, not really, So this is kind of, I guess, the concern with Facebook is that if this does drop, Facebook kind of follows this if it's like a social media. But I don't know, I'm sure Facebook does a lot more than Snapchat does. Kind of shows the propensity to go a lot lower on Facebook if it's going to follow a similar pattern to this. This is kind of like, so I've done most of the key ones for Nasdaq anyway, and I think sort of for the most part, we're on support. There's some that could go lower. So I'd probably say, yeah, my bias, it sort of probably matches a bit more of my bias on NASDAQ to go a bit lower, with potentially a bit of a retracement this week before that going lower. And or just maybe sideways, like I say, like a lot of them were on support, so I wouldn't necessarily want to be shorting right on support, but there are, you know, second hits on support, and I'm not necessarily sure there's the confidence in the market to get any decent sized bounce, so we could just see a bit of sideways, at least until CPI comes in, and then that drives whatever crazy behaviour it drives like normal. This Autodesk could still stand to drop a bit further into that weekly at least. Airbnb, I don't think I've ever charted really properly. Anyway, yeah, ignore that. Citrix Systems has disappeared off my list, and therefore I'm assuming has disappeared off NASDAQ, so I'm not sure what's going on there. Advanced Micro Devices was also another one that I actually traded back in 2017-18 with the when I just randomly was getting into this world, and I bought in here and sold somewhere in here, and really should have held on apparently. Live and Learn. But yeah, another one I sort of follow just more for Bitcoin than anything else. And, you know, decent size rejection, but also coming into a decent demand here. It was sort of coming into a weekly demand and a consolidation, so it's possible we're going to see a bounce off the top here. Prefer possibly the 3 month to actually get a decent bounce, but you know, some of these do bounce more aggressively, so I think this is worth starting to look for longs as well. Maybe that was the other one that I was talking about the other day, last week. Can't remember now. I actually know it's possibly too soon, but yeah, certainly got a drop I would have been looking for on that, and is approaching demand, so it's something that's worth starting to look for potential reversal signals on AMD. Zoom, obviously we still expect to be pretty much dead, because it ran from COVID and then basically came back to ground zero post-COVID, but is on a monthly demand, so, but yeah, not something I'd ever really expect anybody to trade either. And then just finally some of the Dow, just to see whether that aligns with us having hit the 6 month there. So Johnson & Johnson is on a trend line. We're in a 3 month demand, but not a strong one. Yeah, again, obviously not something I'm going to be saying to long now. Needs a bit more time to play out. Don't like that last monthly close, obviously. Could pick up a new monthly supply, but still 20 days to go, so far too early to say that. But yeah, I just need to see if this trend line holds really. On this, wouldn't like to make a call. One of the ones I wouldn't like to make a call, because we are on a kind of warped kind of support. I don't like trend line support, but you know, other people do, so potentially can expect a bounce here, but not one I would long. If we don't get the bounce off this trend line, then you're looking at a possible support at the base of there at 155, since we've had 2 wicks off there before, or if not, moving down into the 6 month. If that happens, then obviously we'll see Dow potentially go deeper, because given the whole market tends to move together. United Healthcare, again, we had this 2 month demand, but we did have the double top, so again, not something I particularly want to long right now, but is on support. And yeah, just needs a little bit of follow-up to see if we're going to start to drift in here and potentially pick up lower demands, or if it's going to hold. Coke dropped into an annual demand here. Annual, 6 month, 3 month. Something worth watching for a buy if this is your field. It's still very early days, but a zone that you could start seeing a significant bounce on this actually. Could possibly come and take out those lows, but this one has taken out the previous one. This is something you can potentially start looking at if you start to see sort of bounce sort of in here in the sort of 50s, then worth watching if you want to get into that. Visa, also in a 3 month demand, but looking more like the UK stocks actually. Don't really like the structure of that. That looks much more bear market-esque, just having started and continuing a downtrend. but far too choppy for me to really make a call on that. Let me just look at the 3 month. Yeah. I'll just add. Do that. Add a new. Let's add that 3 month in. So yeah, can see support coming into this here, but there's too much low time frame chop. So unless you're a supremely high time frame investor, I would suggest leaving that alone. Walmart, one of the other big ones. Yeah, that's obviously also much more bearish and has the capacity to go down more. This is kind of interesting actually, because while I think, you know, Dow has hit that 6 month demand, it's kind of interesting actually these stocks are looking more bearish than the tech stocks in a way, or at least locally so. So I wonder if this held the 3 day or something. Yeah, it's just, again, stocks are too choppy for me low time frame, so they just sort of throw me off a bit. But this, you know, the fact is rejected a 6 month supply. We do have a weekly demand here, and we do have a 3 month demand it's coming off, but you know, there is still a bit of space there at least for this to drop a bit and then potentially take the Dow back down again. Procter & Gamble also looking a lot less attractive, but hit the next 6 month demand again. But I guess this is probably more similar in structure to the DJI itself. In 6 month demand, I probably would like to see this go lower as well. Yeah, so far I'm not really finding these are actually supporting having a bounce on the Dow in the top of the 6 month. Could be wrong. It'd be interesting to see the reaction now I've said that. But yeah, so far I'm seeing like what's Dow 30, isn't it? So I don't know. I think some of the ones that are in NASDAQ fall into the Dow as well. Yeah, and then I just added this sort of separate list to add some more of the Dow. And I think there were some slightly bigger ones. But yeah, these aren't necessarily looking that promising. But again, still not shortable. You know, this still is on a possible support. And it's not exactly like significantly further to go to get to the next monthly demand down here. So yeah, you know, and after 2 big red candles, you know, we were typically expecting retracements, not trying to go, there'll be another giant red candle immediately afterwards. JP Morgan is on annual demand here. The grey is always annual, and then we've got 2 month within it. We've got a weekly here. Something that's not worth shorting and could actually take Dow back up again. Chevron, decent week last week and has held it. Or so far has held it, like compared to everything else, which would retrace most of last week, so that's interesting. But obviously then this is, I think oil went back up again, so that would explain why. Monthly supply, but not a decent one, and multiple hits on it, so something that's looking a little more bullish, and maybe again this could hold DJI. I mean, yeah, this, I suppose now with those last couple, now I'm thinking, okay, maybe we will get what I thought, where we see NASDAQ and S&P fall a bit further, and DJI, some of the elements fall further, but some of them hold, and therefore DJI stays more static. Maybe that's what we'll see. And Home Depot, second hit, double bottom on 3 months demand. Something again potentially to watch. This could be more promising on the long side as well. Coming off a monthly supply, but yeah, multiple hits and a swing failure through it. A swing failure through it, then you expect to go down and take stops, so possibly we go and take out the low here. You know, it's still very early days for us to say any of these are going to sort of bounce and start moving up significantly, so but that's basically what we're looking for signs of. But this isn't a horrendous entry, you know, on a 3 month demand, but we would like to see a little bit more consolidation through here and at least give yourself some like weekly structure or even daily structure to trade within before assuming it's going to make an up move. You know, what I like to see is, so obviously you want to see it take out the last drop. This is not very clean, but it has sort of taken out at least a bunch of these highs. But then you want to see the next test hold demand. So it's come down and it's bounced, but then it's made a new monthly supply and it's rejected. So we're still seeing that local downtrend, and we're not seeing the strength coming into it yet. volume-wise, it's not there either. But that doesn't mean we're just not going to hold a sideways consolidation here for a while before we start to move up again with the whole market. Yeah, so that's pretty much all of it really. Not sure how long I've been going for, and I don't want these videos to be insanely long. But yeah, so all up, I think yeah, I mean, all the stocks I do obviously are the US, so I can't really say this applies to absolutely everything, and I still need to rechart a number of these indices to see if they added anything on last week, although actually I don't think they did, to be honest. But I want to see at least which didn't test monthly supply and therefore could potentially get another move up this week. Why am I? I put the wrong Australia dollar on there. I was like, why aren't my Australia drawings coming up? Yeah, because I feel like some of them at least are likely and should be likely to give a second wave up, potentially taking out the high. DJI is one of them. All the ones that kind of hit major high time frame demand, and particularly the ones that hit for the first time. So Australian dollar, it took out the lows. So this one, I would like to see it take some highs. And it could just be the one last week's and then the one in a couple of weeks before that, rather than anything up the top here. But again, this is a double bottom with a swing failure, so could go significantly higher. DJI could run to the monthly. EU has hit the monthly, so again, slightly more dubious, but if we can start to see some structure, we could at least get a run a bit higher inside to the next alert. Russell, pretty similar. But yeah, for this week, really what I want to be looking for is whether we get any structure that's showing this is going to hold at a higher low. And it's still pretty early days on that. Nasdaq's still looking pretty crap on that. S&P will probably more follow Nasdaq than DJI. But then we might find the EU stocks and some other things are a bit stronger, and the UK as well, I think was... Actually, no, the UK is just too much of a mess for me to really be able to tell with all the wicks to the left, and I just don't like these significant closes. But if we can get back over these monthly levels at the 7,000 and start holding in here, then that could be good for at least a move up to this monthly in here. So yeah, some interesting things to watch for, and like I say, with the CPI, okay, anything can happen, so just trade really carefully, or frankly don't trade this week, but if you do, make sure you use a stop. Any questions, feel free to ask me in the group.